Howdy, my name is Nonat, and I had to go back and forth quite a few times over the last 12 hours before deciding if I really wanted to make this video, and I decided on yes. I know that talking about WotC drama is not exactly my wheelhouse, but when I was talking about the OGL back in January, I did get a lot of comments that were grateful for the update, grateful for a layman who represents the standard consumer who was able to sort of put it all into perspective as a consumer and put it into words that are easier to understand than all the things flying around the internet when it comes to information. And that's something I've always prided myself on, is sort of being a surrogate consumer. You know, I consume the games, I buy the products, I play the games, I enjoy the games, but as far as being a creator goes, sure, I have a little bit of educational experience when it comes to Pathfinder 2e, but overall, I play these games because I love these games, just like hopefully most of you do as well. I can't imagine why you'd be watching these videos if you didn't like the games, but stranger things have happened. So that's what I'm doing here today. If you're unaware, yesterday and the day before were the D&D Content Creator Summit, where a lot of people were invited either over in person or onto a video call where they got to experience the Creator Summit, ask some questions, get some in-depth information, and some of that information has begun to surface from creators on Twitter. Anyone I reference in this video will be linked in the description, so please do go check them out and support them. Follow them on Twitter, follow them on YouTube. They're great people, and they deserved the opportunity to be able to go in person or join this call to be given the information straight on. With regards to that information, it has begun to be spread mainly through Twitter posts. You know, a lot of these people have been so busy over the last few days, they haven't been able to make into official videos or really organized posts anywhere. So what I've done is I've followed a few folks, mainly Nerd Immersion. I know they're an incredibly reputable source, as well as a few others who I will be referencing throughout this video, and giving my thoughts on the matter as a casual consumer of these games. Because remember, this is all about D&D 5th edition, and it would be a lie to say I have no stake in the game, but D&D 5th edition isn't my brand, you know? If this were Pathfinder, obviously there'd be a little bit more bias going on, but as a casual player of D&D 5th edition, I feel I am in a decent position to just talk about what these announcements mean to me as a player rather than a content creator. With all that being said, let's start with potentially the one that irritated me the most and kind of pushed me over into making this video. I was following along with a lot of this, and I wasn't going to make this video until I saw this announcement. It is no longer going to be called 1D&D. This new rules update is not 1D&D. It's also not 6th edition. It's also not even 5.5e. No, the new rules coming out in 2024 for D&D are called D&D 5th edition. Not to be confused with D&D 5th edition. This is awful. This is going to have so much confusion going forward when talking about the rules, when they're completely re-releasing and rewriting new books for the player's handbook and the DMG, which change and update all of the base classes, the base ancestries, or I think they're called species now, and all of that. If you want to invite your friends, what system are we playing? 5th edition. Which one? And that gets even more complicated as we go further, but I don't want this video to be an hour long, so I'm just going to sort of be skimming over and putting up the tweets on screen that correlate to what I'm talking about. But yeah, that's the important part. It's just called D&D 5th edition. There's no new name. They're just calling it an update to the rules of the same system. Next up, Indestructiboy asked a very poignant question that I hadn't even considered, and I really love that they asked this. How will D&D Beyond's unique VTT compete with the others when those ones can run multiple systems, while D&D Beyond is just going to run D&D? Why would you pay for and use a virtual tabletop only for one system when you could use something like Foundry that supports like 50? What if you want to play Call of Cthulhu? What if you want to play Shadowrun? What if you want to play City of Mist? Their answer was, of course, vague and honestly kind of half-assed. The answer was, we're in an interesting position where we're making both the game and the virtual tabletop. Who knows what the future brings? It's unfortunately going to become a running trend where a lot of things that were asked by creators at the summit kind of caught vague answers, almost like they didn't want the creators there to ask questions, they just wanted the creators there to build hype and talk about announcements, which, sure, that's gonna happen too, but it kind of would have been nice to get more concrete answers to the questions that were asked. And as such, a lot of those questions aren't going to be in this video because there's no substance in WotC's answers. So I'm mostly going off of things that were announced officially by WotC, focusing mainly on mechanical stuff, but touching on the VTT occasionally, because that's sort of their big baby that they want to announce to the world next year, and we're hearing nothing about it. All we've heard is that apparently it's being tested in-house first, then it's being tested by content creators, then by certain D&D Beyond subscribers, and then finally going public. So, who knows? Maybe we'll see more in the future. Alright, let's dive into things that have actually been announced for the system, and I'm gonna start with a few things that I'm actually excited for. Like, these are announcements that I'm like, yes, these will improve the game. Thank you for adding these. The biggest one, which is the subject of a video I made last year, they're adding official magic item prices in the new either DMG or PHB. I think it's the DMG next year. They're actually giving magic items prices. And I'm really hoping they go the extra mile like the Pathfinder rulebooks do, where each individual item gets a price, and they don't just say, like, common consumable, common permanent item, common artifact, or something like that. I really hope they go the extra mile to put a price on every single magic item, because it makes it so much more tangible as a player. It makes it so much easier to use as a GM to know exactly what you're giving your players, because gold is often a perfect representation of power level, when it's done right at least. They're also releasing a way bigger monster manual. I think it said 500 monsters in the monster manual, as well as making high-level monsters more dangerous and retuned, which I think this is a great idea. In D&D 5e, depending on the monster, high-level monsters aren't that much scarier than mid-level monsters. I had a level 13 fighter with a ridiculous armor class to the point where he was level 13, but a level 19 Baylor could only hit him on a 19 on the dice. Whether this means more damage on hit, whether this means higher attack rolls, whether this means more layer actions and legendary actions and things like that, I have no idea. It didn't elaborate, but apparently they are retuning the high-level monsters, which should hopefully lead to less random boss stomps when it comes to a party of 4 versus 1 big monster, which is something that has plagued TTRPGs as a whole. Pathfinder suffers from that as well. When you've got 4 player characters and 1 boss, they can shut them down easy. They mentioned they are going to be handling and retuning broken and disruptive builds and subclasses in the game. And I assume, even though they didn't say it outright, they mean the Hexadin, the Hexblade Warlock Paladin who just smites on every single hit and one-shots everything in the game. I'm assuming they're going to be reworking this, rebalancing it so that it's harder to disrupt the balance of the game, which is gonna be difficult because the math in D&D 5e is inherently looser, so it's hard to tighten and balance that, but I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm curious to see what they can do. However, they also stated that all 2014 rules are going to be compatible with 2024 rules. They literally said that you can be playing at a table using 2024 not 1D&D rules, but 1D&D rules. You can be using the new rulebook, but that one of your players can still use the 2014 rulebook and it'll still work, which makes the rebalancing moot. What's the point of fixing and rebalancing a subclass if the player can just say, oh no, I'm just gonna use 2014 Paladin and Warlock rules. They're still legal. You can't tell me I can't. They're legal. WotC says I can use these rules, so why would I use the weaker ones? This is the problem with them posting a whole new rulebook and not calling it an official errata. You know, an errata says those rules are no longer valid. We have rewritten and fixed them. This update that still lets you use old rules doesn't mean anything if you balance and fix something. If they make Paladin Smite weaker in 2024, people will just say, nah, I'll stick with the 2014 Paladin because it's still legal. What's the point? They've also mentioned they're going back on the claim of tradition-based spellcasting. They're not doing Arcane, Divine, and Primal anymore. They're just doing class spell lists like usual, which will be similar to each other, but they'll have unique specific spells that other classes can't have, meaning it's the exact same as it is in 5e. What is exciting is the new weapon mastery system. This is something that's sort of akin to Pathfinder 2e's critical specialization, where certain classes, namely martial classes, will get the weapon mastery class feature, where they can unlock a specific trait on a weapon. This will unlock things like cleaving, grazing, different abilities like a weapon that reduces the opponent's move speed when you hit them. So like I said, very, very similar to the trait system and the crit specialization system of PF2, where certain weapons actually now have defining features that differentiate them, albeit it sounds like only for martial, so if you're a spellcaster, all weapon might still just be damage dice. I like this. It's opened up new avenues for game development, namely that they've leaked that the fighter is going to interact with weapon mastery more than anyone else, potentially to the point of being able to take a property from one weapon and apply it to another at higher levels. So maybe you can have like a cleaving longsword instead of a great axe. I think that'd be really cool. It's a really neat way to give the fighter more class identity and really play with this new system, and I'm looking forward to that. They also dropped the 9 Player's Handbook starting species, and they have removed the half-orc and the half-elf from the Player's Handbook. I don't know if there's any plans to add them in the future, but for now, they are no longer playable. You cannot play a half-elf or a half-orc unless they add some sidebar like Pathfinder 2e has. They have instead been replaced by full-blooded orcs and Goliaths, which, cool, that's fine. At least give us some rule to play half species, because those are fun, you know? If there's gonna take anything from Pathfinder 2e, take the sidebar that says you can be half anything, it just replaces your sort of heritage bonus. Because that would be cool. I'd love to play a half-orc, half-Goliath. That would be a really fun character concept, provided we get the tools to make it. They, of course, made some sweeping statements like they're working on inclusivity, they're working on better representation, especially in the way of avoiding classic fantasy tropes. You know, they're reworking Monk a little bit to shy away from that Eastern Monk stereotype, which I'm actually a fan of. I've mentioned that in videos in the past. I'm not a fan of D&D's Monk, where it's almost entirely Eastern-inspired. Key points are now called spirit points, so if they make it a more universal martial artist class, I think that'll do great things. And, you know, inclusivity and representation is always important, it's always appreciated, as long as it's done for the right reasons. And luckily, you can typically tell. You can tell when a company does something because they care about representation, and when a company does something because they want you to think they care about representation. The ball's in WotC's court there, only time's gonna tell. They're also going on record saying they're trying to streamline the process of learning to play the game. In fact, they want people to know how to play the game before they make their first character, which, that's fine. I think the better way to learn will depend from person to person. I do think a lot of people jump into character creation too fast because they don't know what the game is about, so they don't know what their choices mean. So, I'm fine with that. The thing I'm a little bit questionable on is the pre-made stat array provided for each class. Now, it's optional, obviously, so I don't see this as a bad thing in any way. I think this can absolutely just be something that's in the book, it's unobtrusive, and it gives a good recommendation. So, you know, under the fighter class, it'll say, hey, you should put your 16 in strength and 14s in dexterity and constitution. Put your 8 in intelligence, because you're dumb, idiot. But no, I think showing a recommended stat array is not a bad thing at all. Video games have been doing that for decades, and I don't think it's a bad thing for D&D. And of course, they've gone on record saying, we don't think of you as customers. You're our players, and your experience is what matters first and foremost, which sounds like pandering corporate jargon. Time will tell if that means absolutely anything, but judging from what happened back in January, I'm not exactly holding my breath. And the final thing that concerns me here today is sort of another really big one. It's the second biggest thing that triggered me regarding all the announcements that came out. The virtual tabletop. I touched on this a little bit earlier. Let me go ahead and dive head first into the cheeks of this problem. WotC mentioned granting community access to the creation tools for their VTT, so you can maybe import custom 3D models, make your own maps, make your own adventures and plugins and stuff to make the VTT run how you want to, which is really, really cool. But there's always a but. They did not state whether these creation tools are going to be free, like open access that anyone can use, or if it is going to be paid access just to get the ability to make things for the VTT. And that's here or there. I could understand a company going either way. It would suck if you have to pay to access it. That would make a lot less people use your VTT, because half the fun of a VTT is making your own assets, and if you have to pay to do that, that would suck. But the second thing here is what's really concerning to me. Josh Strife Hayes asked about a marketplace where players could sell their own creations like homebrew and maybe even 3D models for the VTT, custom adventures, custom plugins, anything you could make yourself. If you could sell that on a public marketplace, and maybe WotC gets like 40 to 50% of the revenue, similar to something like Pathfinder Infinite, that would be interesting. I think a lot of people would be excited for an opportunity to sell their creations for this D&D tabletop and make a little bit of money for it while also providing it to a ton of other tables. WotC's response to this question at the virtual summit was maybe. Running a digital marketplace is expensive. WotC, I'm pretty sure if Drive-Thru RPG and Pathfinder Infinite and all of them can run their own marketplace pretty damn effectively, I think you can do it with Hasbro money. I don't think the price of maintaining a digital marketplace is gonna break Daddy Hasbro's bank. I'm gonna be real. This has led me to a concern that very much parallels the OGL situation of January. I fear a future where WotC says, here's the VTT, you can make anything you want, you can publish anything you want, you can put it all online for yourself and for your friends to use, but we own it. Anything you publish to the VTT, maps, custom adventures, custom monsters, custom classes, all of that, if you post any of that, it's ours to use for any purpose. You posted a cool adventure, cool, we're gonna yoink that, reflavor it a little bit, rewrite like a couple paragraphs, maybe replace the BBEG with a muffin, and then we're gonna sell it. Because we're gonna sell this nice new adventure for you and your friends to play that random guy made. But because they signed the contract that lets you use the VTT, it's actually ours. So here you go. Have fun. That'll be $25. This is pure speculation, obviously. It's an exaggeration, it's a speculation, but it's also not without merit because of January, because of the OGL leak, because of the exact wording of those documents that WotC has put forth in the past. Makes me worry that they'll put them forth again if given the opportunity. So that's it. Those are all my big updates. Again, thank you so much, Nerd Immersion, for letting me swipe your tweets. I appreciate it. Definitely go follow them, follow Indestructiboy, follow Josh Strife Hayes, and once other people start talking about the summit, especially the people who were actually there, go support them. They deserve it. They do amazing work. I hope y'all enjoyed this video. I'm not going to read the comments. Honestly, I'm probably not going to disable them because I'm not a baby and conversation is important, but I'm also not going to read them because these videos get some of the most toxic comments ever, like I did back in January, the OGL stuff. Drove me mad. So feel free to talk down there. I'm not going to check. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Until next time, no Nat1.